Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. Hey, what's up, everybody? We're here with Kent Venook, and we're going to jump right into Salesforce. So, Kent, you and I were having a conversation last week, and we sort of got a little bit nerdy about all things sales, and you introduced me to the modern sales guys, which is a phenomenal resource. So, thank you for that. We want to get super deep on the topic of Salesforce. But before we do, I'd love to maybe can you provide a little context as to, why this is so important to you? And maybe some of the, if we could add in some of the things that you learned at Apttus would be a really, really great to add context there.
Yeah. So, I scaled a team the last 3 years over at Apttus, from about 4 of us to 100. And kind of the first step, and I got this from just going out there and doing my own research on how to scale a team, which there aren't too many resources. But, one of the things that I read that made sense to me was making sure that when people are logging activity, when people are, changing the statuses of their leads and tiering out their accounts, make sure that everybody's speaking the same language so that you can effectively track the information. You can make sure that, you understand what results are successful and which ones aren't. And, with your processes in Salesforce, that's really the best way to track all that stuff. And so, when I got to Apttus, and similar to where I am now at Talkdesk, there's a lot of free-form fields. There's a lot of unnecessary fields that people are repurposing for their own benefit. And, it's kind of the Wild West of Salesforce, if you will. So getting everybody on the same page was, super important, just to be able to understand what's happening and kind of to start diving in and fixing things.
Awesome. So one last thing before we really jump in here, can you paint us a picture of, this, sort of magic wand future that, and I know Talkdesk is probably still a work in progress because you just got there, but when you're at Apttus, what is this, if we commit to, learning everything that you're going to teach us today and working on implementing it, what is this magic future that you're going to, enable us to achieve?
Well, I think there's a few things. For one, you'll be able to better identify where the holes are in your own organization. So, on the SDR team, understanding the different metrics will allow you to create a predictive model. So then you can effectively communicate up to the executives what resources you need to get them the results that they need. So, obviously call metrics are important, but then understanding, how many of those calls are actually connects. Of those connections, how many are turning into qualification calls? How many qualification calls are turning into discovery calls? How many of those discovery calls are converting into ops? That's our pay. That's our pay metrics. So, obviously the team cares about that most, but, understanding those different percentages, you can kind of jump in and really work on the different holes that you find. So whether it's coaching or whether it's providing the team with more resources, it allows you to kind of diagnose and then go in and fix. And then a secondary benefit is that when you're trying to then make sure that you're working hand in hand with, let's say, the marketing team, everybody's speaking the same language as well in Salesforce, so you understand how successful their campaigns are, how successful their events are, and based on those numbers, you can decide where to spend money for next year, or whether or not to do an event next year, whether or not different campaigns and messaging is effective. And so it really creates that cross-functional efficiency, and that's really where I saw the benefits kind of start to go up exponentially, when we're working with other teams and everybody being on the same page.
Gotcha. No longer the wild, wild west of the open fields. Now it seems like you're actually you're learning from every interaction here.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's some reps that are making a ton of calls and getting a ton of connections, but not getting a ton of meetings. And so, that's clear that, maybe we need to dive into some of those calls and do some play-by-play call coaching. And then there's others that are having, making a ton of calls, but not getting connects. And maybe they're not talking to the right people, right? Or maybe they're not calling the right people. Or maybe they don't have the right phone numbers. And so maybe it's worth investing in some data. So those are just some examples of the things that we can do.
I know the inner sales guy in me the inner junior sales guy in me is like, oh man, it's process, it's time, it's more burden for me to add into Salesforce. But it feels like you're really painting the picture of, there's a ton of value here, and it's not just selfishly for you and the management team. It's actually to get your team the resources that they need to be successful.
No, for sure. I mean, it's, my job is to enable them to make as much money as possible, and for their personal benefit and to advance them in their careers, and anything I can do to help coach them to get there. I want to be able to do it. It's not so that we can be the bad guy watching over and coming by at noon, telling them they've only made 22 calls and only had 3 connects. And it's not the right attitude to have, in my opinion.
You're not doing any Alec Baldwin impressions anytime soon.
Well, I do horrible Alec Baldwin impressions for every meeting, but yeah, I don't think they appreciate that either.
Fair. Cool. So I know this is a podcast, so we're going to be talking about some screenshots, but I'm going to gray out some of the important stuff, and I'll share them in the show notes for anybody that's listening and wants to take a peek. So you can just click on the episode and jump in there. But let's dive in. So we've got a bunch of notes on the different objects, the different fields, the forms. Where do you logically? Where does your brain go first when you think Salesforce fresh install? What do you set up first?
Yeah, I mean, it's a toss-up between kind of setting up the account layout so that people know what they're looking at and they can efficiently go through their accounts. But I think probably understanding how to log the different activities is going to edge out anything else, just because, you have a team of 6 people and they're making 40, 50 calls a day and sending out 40, 50 emails. That's a lot of information coming in at a time, and you want to really make sure that it's coming in to the right buckets. So, really diving in and making sure that all the activity classifications are uniform, making sure that they're not free form, so people can't just type in, what the call was about, because you're never going to be able to track exactly whether that was a connection, whether that was a connection with a decision maker, whether that connection led to a meeting that was booked. And so, really going through and making those things clear and controlled so that the rep can easily select them is super important. Perfect.
So what types of, specifically, you map out every single potential interaction the rep's going to have, and you have an activity type on is it on the event record in Salesforce?
Yeah, so we at Talkdesk, it's nice because our solution we use it internally, and it will automatically log the activity, and so we have a drop down of what they can classify things. We also have a thing for notes, because obviously we want the call notes, but just in terms of classification, we have things like connection, decision maker, connection, meeting booked, connection, non-decision maker, connection, opportunity created, no connection, left a voicemail, no connection, didn't leave a voicemail, wrong number. So that pretty much covers everything that you're going to want to capture. If it falls outside of those boxes, it's probably not information that's too relevant to, what you're trying to track. And so I really just don't see an extra bucket that's necessary from there, although people could probably argue with me on that for sure. But we really don't have any issues beyond things like that. And if there's something specific type of call that you want to track, go ahead and add the classification. But I would just, be wary that list can start to grow and then it gets convoluted and then reps don't really understand what to choose. So keeping it simpler is usually better.
Fair. It's funny. I've personally been on the other end of, trying to pick the activity drop down, and there's like 37 different pieces, and you're like, wow,
right?
What? Spend more time trying to decide, and you run to your guy next to you and you're like, hey man, how would you classify this? So I like the focus on simplicity.
The auto pick, it's also strategic, putting it in order that, the most used classification. So then they don't have to choose every time they leave a voicemail or something like that. So, things like that can make the rep's life pretty easy.
That's awesome. So once you've got the first step in your fresh Salesforce install is the activities and all those different statuses, all the different things they can do. Now what?
So, I think, again, in the interest of, the most information that's going to be coming in is probably making sure they understand how to manage leads and contacts coming through or that they're working. Also campaign statuses you can put in that. So, understanding that, when a lead comes in, it's open. When, as soon as you make that first call, you need to switch it to working. And, under working, there's probably a few choices. Ours, we use attempting to contact made, and contact made DM. There's probably others you can add, but, again, simple is better, I think. From there, we also have a nurture. So if our team hits that person 7-8 times and they're not answering or giving us any kind of response, then we flip it over to nurture, and then marketing can kind of drip campaign, invite them to webinars, things like that. But they won't put them in those campaigns unless we flip it over appropriately to nurture. So again, the importance of the status comes into play. And then certainly when it's bad data or no interest or competitor, or they're no longer at the company, you archive it, move along. And then, obviously the best example is qualified. You flip it to qualified, and then, that kind of alerts people to do more research if it comes across their desk from clicking on something else at a later time, or, glitch in the system, whatever it is, that status kind of alerts people to say, hey, okay, what is this? Someone else is probably on this. So those are some examples of our different lead, contact, and campaign statuses.
Gotcha. And so for inbound, those are going to exist on the lead record, right?
Yeah, inbound on the lead record, and we also have contacts that we're still chasing or trying to qualify that are clicking on things as well. And so occasionally that will get passed back to the SDR to continue to nurture and kind of get across the finish line, so to speak, for the SDR role.
Gotcha. And when you're doing outbound, can I assume you're using the contact and campaign status, or what are you using there?
Yeah, so I mean, with outbound, you're building the contacts and using a similar working status. And again, once they're in the system, we're adding contacts rather, and then you don't always get a hold of them, as we all know. And so it's the same story. And because the lead and the contact statuses are aligned, they're able to easily switch it over to nurture. Marketing takes control and drips that contact until they, are ready to listen.
That's awesome. That's a really important piece that I haven't seen too many other places do that. So your lead status and your contact status are exactly the same dropdown?
Yeah, I mean, they line up exactly. So far, we haven't had a situation where we've needed anything more or less, or a reason to cut one piece out from the next. If somebody has a better way, please contact me. But we haven't run into any problems. So
awesome. And so at a high level, because everybody can't see the document that I'm looking at here, your statuses are open, then nurture, and you've got all these sort of sub classifications under nurture, then working, archived, and qualified. Right? Are each of those,
Yep.
Is it sort of the 5 high level statuses and then you have another drop down, or do you just have like the 15 that are there? And those are all just different statuses.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's 5 main, and then there's a sub status, and that just allows you to be a little bit more specific. And the reason we added those is because we had the original 5, and people were kind of asking, well, what is this? What is that? And the sub statuses kind of help them define and figure it out. Certainly new reps makes it a lot easier for them to go, oh, okay, this is what archive means. It means inaccurate data, no interest, do not contact, not a fit, or no longer the company, so they can kind of just self-explanatory as they're going through and working their leads contacts.
Cool. And when you say sub status, is this you've got one high level status, like it's a drop down field, and then you've got another drop down, or is it sort of nested in that same drop down?
No, yeah, it's 2 separate, and so you'll have the status, and the sub status is grayed out once you select something. For example, there's only one open, the sub status won't be able to be selected. But if you choose nurture, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that will now, appear as selectable. You'll select your sub status and then save it. You're on your way. And again, this is, the lead status and the contact status. So, different than obviously the activity log, which we don't want them to have to select a bunch of different things when they're logging activity. So a little bit more of a thoughtful selection.
No, of course. Yeah. And how does campaign status fit in here? I can see, leads coming in inbound and they get created automatically. Great. Contacts, you're sort of uploading and they start, open, I'm assuming. What is campaign status do? And where does that live?
Yeah. So campaign status, we use Marketo and build campaigns that go out. We use it for events. So, for example, obviously Dreamforce is a huge show. And so we get a bunch of different scans throughout the 4 days, and those scans get put into a campaign, and the campaign status allows us to understand which leads have been touched in response to the campaign and which haven't. And so we actually have a trigger that will update the campaign. So, once you flip it from open to working, it's not like you then have to go into the campaign and then flip it to working. It will flip it to those different statuses, but then that way marketing can track their results and understand which leads are being worked on, whether they need to yell at me because my team is not following up on the scans. And then finally, of the leads, which ones have converted into contacts and opportunities, and then they can decide and, help build their ROI for the event.
Oh, that's really cool. So that's the piece that sort of ties it all together from inbound, outbound, and your marketing automation system.
Yeah. And it can apply. Obviously Dreamforce is, the mecca of events for Salesforce partners, but it can even apply to just small campaigns, different field events, baseball games, certain call campaigns or webinars, things like that. It'll allow you to get an ROI and, ultimately ask for more marketing dollars if things are working, and allow you to save on events that just don't convert.
And I remember when I started, I actually started in sales when I was in high school. And then I did a bunch of marketing courses in college, and I was reading all the case studies and oh, you're going to spend all this money and not be able to have this ROI, because obviously I was in college. This is kind of a while ago now. And that sort of not being able to get that good data really drove me nuts. I'm like, well, as a marketer, how am I going to get paid? Because I'm used to as a salesperson, I know my numbers, I get paid based on my numbers. And that was one thing that really I couldn't figure out. Now, obviously, as a college kid, I'm sure there were ways of measuring it. But this is man, if you would have saved me so much time and frustration if you showed me this 15 years ago. Where were you, man?
Well, I'll tell you, there is a little bit of resistance when you go from, what do we say, the wild, wild west to process. But, and so, it is a tough decision, especially here at Talkdesk. I'm trying to get to where the team was at Apttus in terms of process and, and it's a different process, but it aligns with specifically to Talkdesk. And there's always kind of, if I do this, it's going to cause the reps headache. They're going to be focused on the changes and, looking at the playbook to figure out if they're doing things right. And it's going to cost us some efficiency. We've got some lofty goals, but, I think if you just rip off the Band-Aid and put things in place and, they make sense, then it's really, in the long run, it's a no-brainer.
What's the biggest sort of objection you get to the process here? A lot of it is reps want to use the subject line for all sorts of different notes, and they don't necessarily want to choose the drop down. And, the easiest fix for that is just put a metric on it. And, certainly if you pay someone based on how many meetings they schedule, they're going to go ahead and choose that selection when it happens. And so that's always the easiest way to do it. But, if you go through and kind of explain to them what you're trying to accomplish and that it's really a benefit to them in tracking their own statistics, it ends up being a no-brainer to them. So for all the SDRs that are listening right now and that are rolling their eyes, they're like, come on, Ken, really? What's the benefit?
I know, they're like, yeah, I'm sorry. So, I mean, the benefit to them is they understand what they're doing and what results are coming from it and what they need to do to be better. Simple trick from John Barrows is, understanding how many calls you need to make to get X amount of connections and how many of those connections convert to meetings and how many of those meetings convert to opportunities. And, if it takes you 50 calls to get one connection and you need 2 connections to hit quota, that you need to make 100 calls to hit quota. And so, and if you don't want to make 100 calls, then maybe we should work on other things like making better and smarter phone calls. Once you have the call, asking different questions than what you usually ask that doesn't lead to a meeting. And so, for an SDR who's trying to make it in the sales side of things, then it's what they need to do to get to that next level. And if they're not motivated to do that, then they're probably going to wash out. I mean, this is a thankless job. And if you don't want to be in sales, bless your heart for being in this industry.
Totally. I remember the power that the first time I actually really as a rep, the first time I really understood these metrics, because I sort of grew up in the wild, wild west a little bit. And yeah, it was like suddenly there's daylight and I can see, and now I show up to work and I know, exactly how many calls I need to do, give or take, because, it's a numbers game, but understanding the numbers, it's like being able to just, I don't know, you can suddenly see all the math and how it works. You can see behind the curtain. It's not this dark art that, you have to pray and sacrifice and all that. It's you just know the numbers. And once you've figured out the formula, you just need to know what your daily inputs are and trust that the math will eventually work out in your favor.
Yeah. I mean, I do the spreadsheet that, again, this is from Barrows, but you punch in, you put in your numbers, you calculate it, reference the fields, and you put in what pipeline you can generate per day, per week, per month with X amount of phone calls, and change the variable and be like, oh man, if I make 10 more calls per day, I'm going to be at 120% of my number at the end of the year. And, if you're not looking at it like that, it's pretty tough to kind of really understand the value of, just 10 more phone calls. But it's real money, especially, and performance. And especially when you're trying to get to that next level, it's super important.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. The difference, yeah, it's such a powerful sort of idea there is that spreadsheet that you mentioned, and just knowing, if I want to hit quota, what do I need to do better? And just having that exact formula. It's 10 calls a day. Simple. I'm not saying that's the secret formula, but knowing and understanding that is so powerful.
Yeah. And then you start making those 10 calls, and all of a sudden the numbers aren't there. You can say, okay, well, what else am I missing here? And again, start to diagnose some of the holes, and that kind of goes back to how we started this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Even the best sort of players, they're always, reviewing the game tapes, right? We don't always have the luxury of that. You're not going to get a coach sitting on every call of yours. You're not going to be able to get somebody to review every single email chain. But at least if you have these metrics at a high level, you can get somebody knowledgeable on your team to sort of steer you in the right direction to help you unlock that next level of performance.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. We have account tiers up here. So I'm assuming, this is, where does this sit in the process for you? When does one of your reps create an account?
Yeah, I mean, in the enterprise space, the higher levels, generally we've bought that data. Obviously, the teams in the lower markets are building out territories, and different companies are emerging constantly with all the different funding, especially locally here in San Francisco. But I think mostly with the account tiering and the account layout, I just want to make it as easy as possible for the reps to get a snapshot of what they're looking at when they are going through their day. And I think it's just as important to standardize these views and make sure that it makes sense. But also, from a tiering perspective, being able to build lists and manage off of those lists so that you understand exactly what accounts you should be going after with, the different percentage of time as you're going throughout the day.
Awesome. So you've got 4 account tiers here. Do you want to walk us through them?
Yeah. This is, and again, this is specific to what we're trying to do here is we've kind of got tier 1, which we've classified as the whales. We've got tier 2, which is kind of table stakes. That's what's going to get you fed as an AE. And so as an SDR, that's where we want to find the bulk of our deals. And then we've got the wide net, which is tier 3, and then kind of the rest. Right now at Talkdesk, my team, the enterprise team, is focused specifically on building out the territory and getting as much exposure as possible so that we don't miss out on projects simply because they haven't heard of Talkdesk, because we haven't been up in the enterprise space for more than the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've also got, tier 1, which are the whales, which are accounts that, huge enterprise accounts, Citibank, Walmart. These are deals that, we would certainly like to get, but, those are 2 years out and we need to hit our goals now. So that kind of brings us to the table stakes. These are our target approaches. These are like top 25 accounts for our AEs. And this is where the, true 7-10 cadence comes into play, and really doing intelligent account-based marketing and account-based outreach, very tailored messaging, and, a lot of stalking on social media and commenting on people's posts and things like that. And then, down to tier 3, we have the wide net, which is kind of, I call it the build phase, which is these are all the accounts that probably haven't heard of Talkdesk, and, we need to be blanketing them with more of a nurture campaign so that when they have a project, they can, say, oh, well, Talkdesk is a telephony solution. They work with Salesforce. Maybe we should add them to our, RFP. So, and then the rest, those are accounts that, kind of fall out of our realm of what we want to go after at this point in time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So the rest are sort of that ignore status.
Yeah, I mean, there's good accounts in there. I guess like a good example would be government. If they outreach to us and they say they have a project with a budget, yes, absolutely, we want to talk to them and we're going to give them our full attention. But going in and trying to create projects in those accounts is probably not the right focus for us at this point in time.
Fair enough. I really want to, I know we should keep going on the Salesforce track, but I'm super curious. You mentioned you're building out this right now with your team. What does that involve? Is that, you've got all of the data and you say, put it in a big spreadsheet and say, these ones are tier 1, tier 2, or what's your process there?
Yeah, no, with it, we're partnered very closely with our AE team. So, I think that's just as important as anything else we've talked about today. And so it's a one-to-one relationship right now, which is really nice for the size company we were at. I remember when we were this size at Apttus, I think I had 5 reps. I was a BDR. And so it's one-to-one, and, we rely on the account planning and the targeting to come from the AE that manages that territory.
Okay.
And then, I have a meeting with, our VP of sales, myself, the SDR, and the rep, especially in these first couple months here, where we all sit down and go through and add, subtract accounts. It's a dynamic list along with our ICP, and we're constantly making changes to it. So it's an ever living account. And, as something in the tier 3, someone clicks on something, or, we kind of sniff out a project, we move it up to tier 2. And as we hear from tier 2 that they just bought someone else and they're on a 2-year contract, we move it down to tier 3 or tier 4 and kind of continue on.
Awesome. Very cool. Last piece we wanted to sort of chat about was the lead source. So where does this, I know this is super critical for marketing. Where does the lead source, this drop down live in your Salesforce? Is it just on the lead record there?
Yeah, no, well, so you mean the tier drop down?
Under,
Did you say the tier?
Sorry, the lead source drop down.
Oh, the lead source. Yeah. So the lead source drop down, that's going to live, it'll actually transfer through. So as you convert, that lead source will be a snapshot so that we understand where the lead came from, kind of a first touch, middle touch, last touch situation. So, maybe we first talked to this person at Dreamforce, a year ago, and then, so we can kind of keep that stamp. We understand, where it originated, and then maybe there's some middle touches with the SDR. Maybe the last touch, which actually brought in the opportunity, was inviting him to a field event. So we have a couple different ways of tracking it, and that kind of allows us to, keep buckets for where our marketing dollars and where our SDR dollars are being spent to bring in the different leads.
Looking through just our notes here, I know we've hit we're actually a few minutes over time here. Wanted to sort of bring it back to you and your role at Talkdesk here. Just one last question, just around, and share what you're comfortable with, where we can edit things out afterwards. But wanted to talk about you and the role at Talkdesk. What's your quota this year? What are you going to do to get there? What's your your sales plan for this year, for 2017?
Yeah, we have some very lofty goals. I guess without getting into the multiplier that we use or what the other teams are going to bring in, I don't think there's any harm in sharing. My number is 100 million in pipeline, which is pretty aggressive considering it's a new market space for us, and we're going upstream into the bigger deals that are going to take more of our attention and take longer to close. I approach it the same way that I approach things as an SDR, and the same way that I ask them to approach it is, okay, how many meetings do we need to get there? And I base that on the number of, the average deal size that we have. and then, based on our conversion rate. So, with 100 million, let's say that we have 150K ACV, I'm going to need, what is that, 1,400 meetings to get there. And, if I know that 50% of those are going to convert into ops, then we're going to need about 700 opportunities. And we've got 12 team members that we're scaling to, and, do the math there. You're looking at about 60 ops per rep, five ops per month per rep. And now I know that I got to figure out how to get each person to 5 opportunities each month. Right. So, that's kind of where I start. And then, from there, going through and setting up metric goals for the team. And then, again, I think that's a dynamic approach as well, where, some reps need to make 80 calls per day to hit their numbers, and some reps are more sharpshooters and they only need to make 35 calls, and, manage accordingly to each team member as you're going through, with the idea of, setting a baseline for them and a guideline, and then they'll settle into their own groove, so to speak, depending on their different skill sets.
That's so cool. I love how you you've taken it from a huge number of 100 million in pipeline to each, as an SDR, I just need to generate 5 ops a month. Like it's so easy. It goes from like this massive thing that there's no way we're going to hit that to, oh, that's a very achievable number that I can work towards this month.
Yeah, you can wrap your head around it. And, obviously there's going to be some sweetheart deals that come in for 1 million seats or whatever, the dream of an SDR. And, that will help for, maybe some of these earlier days where, we're kind of trying to figure out what works, and, I still have to hire a few folks, but, I think the only thing you can do is break it down into those simple terms and then manage to that and make adjustments. And, at the end of the year, if you're, staying honest with yourself and looking at what you can do to make the team better, then you end up pretty close to where you need to be. If it's not better. So.
Awesome. So on the other end of those meetings, let's talk about who you're targeting. What types of companies are you going after here?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty, for a SaaS company, I don't think anything is going to shock you. We're going after high tech, high growth companies, e-commerce, retail. These are all industries that we want to be talking to. Companies that are customer centric, certainly with Talkdesk and being in the, a contact center solution, companies that are investing in speaking with their customers, and engaging with their customers. Those are all people we want to talk to, companies with customer satisfaction issues, companies that are trying to kind of take a different approach. The call center is oftentimes looked at as a cost center. And so, turning it into a revenue generator and helping with customer retention and how to grow your accounts through better communication with your customers, all things that, our ears perk up when we hear these kind of initiatives coming through. And those are the kinds of things that we're going after.
Awesome. I'd love to sort of dive a little bit deep here. How do you turn something like a call center from a cost center into a rev gen, something that's generating revenue?
Yeah, so with today, customers are wanting to speak to the companies that they buy from in all sorts of different ways, right? So, for example, if I'm ordering from DoorDash and my food's late and the driver looks like he's driving in circles, it doesn't really do me much good to shoot him an email to the DoorDash customer service So, I need to be able to get in touch with that driver very quickly. And so the Omni-Channel allows us to talk to that driver through text. And, I think everybody had experienced this as well with companies like Lyft, where the driver will text you, that they're circling the block. And, I think that experience allows your customers to have a better experience and will allow them to come back to you, as opposed to losing that customer because their food never showed up and, all you had to do was just kind of refund them and they just are turned off to the entire experience. And so, customer retention, I think it's a pretty well-known concept that acquiring a customer is much harder than keeping one from a cost perspective, certainly. And so, just those benefits alone will, create an ROI for that investment in an omni-channel support system. And then, just small things of, as a rep, understanding what that customer has done and having a full view of the customer lifecycle in terms of what they've bought, and even understanding why they're calling before they call can allow you to route things more appropriately and can allow you to better serve the customer. Can also help you, even suggest other products that maybe the customer could use that other customers use, and they wouldn't have that without kind of some of the systems that we have in place that allow you to see these things before you answer the phone. I think we've all been on the archaic routing systems where you call in, you give your information, you press 6 or 7 numbers and 6 or 7 different menus, only to reach an agent who asks you the same information again. And, I don't really like that experience, and it doesn't make me want to buy more when I go through that. So that's the idea.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm the guy that always just ends up mashing 0 a million times. Representative. Finally says we're routing you to a representative. So yeah, or the ones that are just like the really, really old school and they just hang up on you. They're like, does not compute.
No, that's okay.
I'm calling.
Like I put the number now that you told me to. Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm going to do the typical salesperson hand on the doorknob trick. I feel like we're just about done the interview, but I'm going to ask one last question because I saw it on the page here, and I know everybody would be mad at me if I didn't ask this. So last question, sure. What's really working for you?
So, I think the idea of one thing working, I think what's working for me is understanding that there's no such thing as a silver bullet. And, kind of pushing that down to the team, keeping it creative, and what's working for one person is probably not going to work for the next. And so using as many channels as possible, phone, email, events, social, even direct mailings is what we're seeing a lot of success with, by hitting people in all sorts of different ways and trying to, make the messaging as specific as possible so that we, set ourselves apart from the rest. And then, tracking the metrics and making adjustments. It's all back to kind of setting up that foundation to be able to get a view of what your reps are doing on a day-to-day basis, and then making adjustments based on the info you have, and not in the sense of, hey, you're not making enough calls, but hey, let me help you be better. And it seems to be working really well.
Cool, man. And the sort of breakdown, you've written it out here. Are you comfortable sharing that? Of where your deals are coming from?
I mean, this is going to be very different probably in the next couple of months, but I think I just pulled an op report for the last 100 deals, and 20% has come from calling, 20% has come from email responses, 15% has come from, things like in-mail and social selling. 30% has come from events. I think that will probably grow as we do more and more events. And then, we're getting about 15% inbound in the enterprise space right now. So, it just kind of goes to prove that, different opportunities are coming from different places. And, if you're not managing to that, then it's going to be, you're going to find yourself pigeonholed and wondering why you're not getting more success. And it's probably because you're leaving out one of those channels.
Awesome. I love how easy it was for you to pull all this information. I've been in organizations where you ask a simple question and it takes 4 or 5 reports that you got to stitch together. I think this is the proof in the pudding for how awesome and how easy your system makes your life.
It does. Yeah. I mean, we have different headaches, but having this information and data be one of those headaches is kind of silly at this point, with all the money that we spend on all these different systems that we use.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we've got many more mistakes to make, but let's make new and different, more interesting ones in the future.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Kent. I think that's a great place to end it. For those that are listening that are just so impressed by the Salesforce knowledge that you possess, want to get in touch, how can people reach you?
So you can reach me at Kent, Kent.Venook. That's V like Victor, EN like November, OOK at Talkdesk.com. I think /K Venook is my LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to nerd out on sales dev stuff. So reach out anytime. Happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kent. This is awesome.
Thanks, Collin.